Okay, y'all were interested in this deck I picked up. This is the Technics RS-1500. It's a 2-track, 4-track playback machine, and it records on 2-track. So when we got this deck, it didn't look anything like this. These guys right here, these are the tensioners, they were stuck way up here. And you'd have to tighten it up just a little bit, and then the deck would allow you to fast forward and rewind. But when you push stop, boom, these guys would come real loose like that. That was a problem with the device that holds the tension on these guys, and combination with the brakes that stop the motors from spinning. So I went ahead and refurbished this end of it, and on the brakes I replaced all the pads and I readjusted them. The counter wasn't working. On playback I was getting almost no signal off of the tape heads, even though when I'd adjust this knob here, this is the output control, it's a double-stepped variable resistor. So one of the resistors controls the right channel and the other controls the left, and they're split. So you can move them together or you can move them separate. This guy here was extremely noisy, barely making any contact at all, and I'd have to sit here and jiggle it to get it to make any noise come out, and then I could flip it over to 2-track and do the same thing. I could jiggle it to get something, but it was really staticky when I was moving between the two. So the first order of business was to pull this whole thing. There's 3 screws here that hold this together. Pull this head assembly off and deoxit the heck out of this guy. Clean the heads as long as it was off. Then I bolted it back up, and boom, instantly this thing had great contact. This pot here, and it's still bad, but it's not nearly as bad as when I first got the deck. It was really noisy. I deoxidated on this side, and then I went around back and deoxidated on the back side. It's still noisy though, so I may have to just either replace this guy or take the whole variable resistor out and take it apart and see if I can clean the contacts directly. Those two things, those are the back of the pots that need to get adjusted. Take those apart at some point. They're soldered into the motherboard down the bottom, which is that's the analog board down there. And those two need to come out. I have looked up the part numbers. I cannot find a substitute for these, and mostly it's because they're those stepped attenuators. There's 2 variable resistors stacked one in front of the other, and I don't know enough about electronics to find one if I can't match the part number. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the things we did on this deck. Okay, so here's the inside of the motor. These are the 2 motors right here. Here's one, and then there's the other motor right back there. That guy back there, this pulley right here, there's 2 belts going to it. One attaches to this bottom capstan down here, and then the other goes off to the counter. That belt was off, and so that's why the counter wasn't working. Presumably because when I would fast forward and rewind, it made a hell of a noise. So what I did was I oiled 3-in-1 oil on this and the post on the back of the counter, and then I also pulled that lower capstan out and re-greased the bearings there using some lithium grease. Now we were talking about tension. The tension arm in the front is governed by this bellows system here, and there's one on each side of the deck to control the left and right tension arms. These guys have a seal on the top of them that go bad. You don't actually have to replace it. What you have to do is flip the seal backwards so it's making a nice clean seal again. To get to the bellows, you have to take that top motor here out. It's a little switch. You have to take out the motor, and then you got to fish a bunch of screws with a really long screwdriver and try and get 4 screws removed. Then the bellows comes out. You can disassemble them and flip the little rubber seal around. So the bellows on the B side is right in here, so you just have to pull this fuse plate out, and again the motor has to come out. And while you got the motors out, that's when you can get to the brake pads, which sit underneath the motor right down here. There's a little rocker arm. There's 2 brake pads on each side. That is the old brake pad. Here is the new brake pad. This here is the brake adjustment plate. This pin here has to live 1 millimeter off the bottom and 1 millimeter off the side. And you do that by unscrewing these two guys here, one over there, and then you rock that plate up until you get the right amount of tension and then lock them down. The deck is functioning really well right now. It's holding tension, it's going through its fast forward and rewind duties without a problem. It is playing and it sounds reasonable. I just am worried that this pot right here is causing me a lot of unnecessary noise. That's the Technics RS-1500.